My daughter's father wants to use our daughter as therapy for his wife. I've been divorced from my ex-husband Kyle for 4 years now. We have a daughter together named Maisie who just turned 7. The custody arrangement has always been week on, week off, switching every Sunday evening. Kyle remarried about 2 years ago to a woman named Diane, and honestly things were fine at first. Then about 3 months ago, Kyle started asking if Maisie could spend extra time at his place. Random afternoons, extra overnights. He said Diane wanted to take Maisie to pottery classes in the trampoline park. I said sure a few times because Maisie always came back happy, but then it became constant. Every few days he'd text asking if Diane could grab Maisie from school on my days, or if she could sleep over Wednesday even though it was my week. When I started saying no, Kyle called and said we needed to meet. We met at a Starbucks near Maisie's school. He looked exhausted and said Diane was having a hard time lately, and spending time with Maisie was one of the only things that helped her feel better. I asked what was wrong with Diane. He got uncomfortable and said she was dealing with stuff from her past and being around Maisie calmed her down. I asked him straight out if he was asking me to hand over our daughter so his wife could use her for emotional support. He got defensive and left looking frustrated. His texts got more insistent over the next 2 weeks. When I kept saying no, he called me late one night sounding desperate and asked if we could meet again. This time I had a bad feeling. I checked the recording laws in our state, one-party consent, and started the voice recorder on my iPhone before walking into that coffee shop. Kyle looked worse than before. He told me Diane had a daughter from a previous relationship who died in a car accident 6 years ago. The girl was 8. He said the grief came back hard recently, maybe because of Maisie's 7th birthday. Diane was barely functional some days. He said Diane's therapist suggested she spend time around children to help separate her grief from the present. And since Maisie was already right there, it made sense. I said our daughter wasn't a grief counselor. He snapped and said I didn't understand how bad it was, that if Diane could just have more time with Maisie, she'd stabilize. I asked him point blank if Diane's therapist actually knew she was using my specific daughter for this. He went quiet, then admitted the therapist didn't know the details. That's when it clicked. I asked how his marriage was doing. He finally admitted they'd almost separated twice in the past year. If Diane didn't get better soon, she was going to leave him. My stomach dropped. I asked if he was seriously asking me to sacrifice our daughter's emotional well-being to save his marriage. He begged me to reconsider. I said no, and left. 3 weeks later, I got served with custody modification papers. Kyle was requesting Maisie spend 3 weekdays plus alternating weekends at his house. I hired a lawyer that day. When I played her the recording, she said we had everything we needed and requested a guardian ad litem for Maisie. The court hearing was last week. Kyle's lawyer went first, talking about how Diane had a flexible schedule. Then my lawyer called Kyle to the stand and asked why he wanted more custody time right now specifically. He said Diane had been doing better lately with more time around Maisie. My lawyer played the recording. Kyle's voice filled the courtroom talking about how Diane needed Maisie to stabilize, how their marriage was falling apart. You could hear him say, she just needs a few more months and then things will level out. Kyle's face went white. The judge denied the petition immediately and granted me right of first refusal. When we walked out of the courthouse, Diane was sitting in Kyle's Tesla in the parking lot. She got out and walked straight toward me. I tensed up, but she didn't look angry. She looked destroyed. She said she didn't know Kyle had filed for custody, that when he told her about the hearing last night, she realized what he'd done. She looked at me and said she was sorry, that she'd already told her therapist everything. Then she turned to Kyle and said she was going to stay with her sister for a while. Kyle looked panicked and said they could work through this. Diane shook her head and said she couldn't be around him right now, that he'd manipulated both her and Maisie. She got in her own car and drove away. Kyle stood there looking like his whole world just collapsed. He looked at me like I was supposed to feel bad for him. I didn't. I picked up Maisie from school that afternoon and took her for ice cream. She asked if Diane was okay. I told her Diane was going through some grown-up stuff and sometimes adults need time to work things out. Kyle texted me 2 days later saying Diane moved out. I heard from a mutual friend.